Nathan Carter sat at his desk, staring at the clock. Time was slipping away, and with it, the last shred of hope for his company's survival. The gala that evening wasn't just another social event. It was the only chance to secure the funding Sterling Corp desperately needed. But fate had thrown him a curveball. His planned companion, a polished executive who knew the investors well, had canceled at the last minute. Frustration clawed at him, but there was no time to dwell. He needed someone, anyone, and then his eyes landed on Sophia Lane.
Hello, I'm the storyteller of the channel, and I would like to ask for a second of your time to subscribe, activate the notification bell, and like the video so that YouTube can take our story to more people who are passionate about stories like this. Thank you, and without further ado, let's continue with our story.
Sophia had never imagined herself in the spotlight. She was just a receptionist, answering calls, managing schedules, blending into the background of Sterling Corp's high-powered world. But when Nathan approached her with a proposition, something in her chest tightened. A chance like this would never come again. He needed a partner for the evening, and she could either step up or watch her life remain unchanged. Despite the nerves bubbling in her stomach, she squared her shoulders and agreed. After all, what did she have to lose? The moment she stepped into the grand ballroom, all eyes were on her. The woman who had spent years fading into the background now stood bathed in shimmering light, exuding grace and quiet confidence. Nathan, stiff beside her, murmured introductions, trying to salvage the evening. But the investors' smiles were tight, their interest waning. They weren't here for pleasantries. They wanted answers. And Nathan, despite his best efforts, was struggling to provide them. Sophia listened, absorbing every word, feeling the tension in the air like an electric charge. She hadn't planned to speak. That wasn't her role. But when she saw an opportunity, when she noticed the investors' skepticism grow, she acted on instinct. In a clear, unwavering voice, she spoke up. Not about numbers or projections, but about something more powerful, the company's heart. She told a real story of resilience, of people whose lives were shaped by Sterling Corp's work. She made them see beyond the balance sheets. And in that moment, the room shifted. Eyes that had been disinterested now gleamed with intrigue. Nathan felt his pulse quicken. What was she doing? This wasn't her place. His grip on the situation had already been slipping, and now a receptionist was taking the reins. Yet, as he watched, he couldn't deny the impact. Investors leaned forward, nodding, exchanging glances. A particularly influential figure, Oliver Hayes, seemed especially engaged. But alongside that realization came something else, an unsettling mix of irritation and loss of control. He wasn't sure whether to be impressed or furious. As the night unfolded, Sophia's words left a lasting impression. Investors who had been on the fence seemed swayed, their reluctance softening. Nathan's mind spun with contradictions. She had helped undeniably, but she had also overstepped. This wasn't her role, and yet there was a glimmer of something he couldn't quite define, something that made him uneasy. As the final handshakes were exchanged, and the evening drew to a close, one thought loomed in his mind. This night wasn't over. Not yet, because when morning came, there would be consequences. The moment Sophia stepped into the gala, she became someone new. Draped in a sleek midnight blue gown, her presence was impossible to ignore. The same people who passed her daily without a second glance now struggled to hide their curiosity. Nathan barely recognized her. For years, she had been a quiet figure behind the desk, efficient, reliable, invisible. But tonight she was a force. And yet, despite the admiring glances, she felt a strange mix of exhilaration and unease. She wasn't here to be seen. She was here to help. As the evening unfolded, Nathan found himself fighting an uphill battle. Investors weren't biting. No matter how many figures he threw at them, their skepticism remained. They wanted security, certainty, neither of which he could guarantee. His polished words fell flat against their guarded expressions. A sinking feeling gnawed at him. Sterling Corp's future hung by a thread, and no matter how hard he tried to spin the numbers, it wasn't enough. The realization stung. He was losing them. That's when Sophia did the unthinkable. In a room full of industry giants, she spoke, not in rehearsed jargon or empty promises, but in something much more powerful, raw, undeniable truth. She told a real story of the company's impact, of the people behind the figures, of why Sterling Corp mattered beyond balance sheets. Her words painted pictures, not statistics. The investors who had been checking their watches moments before now listened, really listened. A few even nodded. Nathan stiffened. This was completely out of line. Sophia was here as an accessory, nothing more. Yet, as he scanned the room, he saw something shift. The investors, people he had spent months trying to convince, were now engaged. A man at the head of the table, Oliver Hayes, leaned forward, his interest undeniable. He asked Sophia a question, and she answered with the same quiet confidence. Nathan's jaw tightened. She was stealing his moment. The conversation took a turn Nathan hadn't expected. Where his figures had failed, Sophia's words succeeded. She wasn't just gaining their attention. She was gaining their trust. Hayes, an investor known for his sharp instincts, turned to Nathan with renewed interest. She makes a good point, he mused. Maybe we've been looking at this the wrong way. The shift in the room was undeniable. Nathan had fought for control all evening, and yet, in a matter of minutes, Sophia had accomplished what he couldn't. And that was a problem, a big problem. By the time the evening ended, Nathan couldn't shake the frustration bubbling beneath his composed exterior. He should have been relieved, grateful, even. But all he could think about was how a receptionist had walked into a room full of power players and taken over the conversation. It wasn't just surprising. It was humiliating. He barely spoke a word as they left, his mind already racing toward the next morning. Because no matter how well she had performed, Sophia had crossed a line, and there would be consequences. She just didn't know it yet. The next morning, Sophia walked into the office with her heart still racing from the night before. The feeling of standing in that room, commanding attention, had been unlike anything she had ever experienced. She had made a difference. She had seen it in their faces. The investors had listened, not because of Sterling Corp's financial projections, but because she had reminded them why the company mattered. But as she settled at her desk, something in the air felt off. The usual hum of the office was subdued. People stole glances at her, whispering. Then her phone rang. Nathan wanted to see her. She barely had time to knock before Nathan's voice cut through the tension. Close the door. He stood by the window, his back to her, shoulders tense. You went too far last night, he said, his voice clipped. That was not your place. Sophia's stomach tightened. She had expected some pushback, but not this. I was only trying to help, she said carefully. He turned then, eyes cold. And in doing so, you made me look incompetent. The words hit like a slap. She had saved the night, hadn't she? How could that be a bad thing? But Nathan wasn't interested in her justifications. His decision was already made. You're fired. The words landed like a stone in her chest. Fired? Just like that? Her mind raced. This had to be a mistake. She had given her all to this company. And for what? For daring to speak? Her throat tightened, but she refused to let the tears fall. You're making a mistake, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan didn't flinch. Maybe, but I can't have an employee who doesn't know their place. The weight of his words sank in. It wasn't about her performance. It was about control. She had done what he couldn't, and instead of gratitude, he resented her for it. As she walked out his office, the whispers grew louder. Some employees avoided her gaze, while others watched with something close to admiration. She wasn't just another worker being let go. She was the woman who had dared to speak the truth and paid the price for it. As she packed her things, an unexpected sense of clarity settled over her. The job had given her stability, yes, but had it ever truly valued her? Had Nathan ever seen her as more than a background figure? Maybe this wasn't a loss. Maybe it was something else entirely. A door closing, yes, but what if another one was about to open? She exhaled, gripping the box in her hands. She didn't know what came next, but one thing was certain. This wasn't the end of her story. Because the universe has a way of rewarding those who dare to stand up for what's right. Sophia sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the box of belongings from her desk. it still didn't feel real. One day, she had been just another employee at Sterling Corporation. The next, she had spoken her truth, and everything had changed. Her emotions swung between anger and doubt. Had she really done the right thing? Or had she just thrown away the best opportunity she'd ever had? The world outside her window kept moving, indifferent to her turmoil. Then her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Ms. Lane." The voice on the other end was deep, assured. "This is Oliver Hayes." Her breath caught. The investor from the gala. The one who had listened, really listened, when she spoke. Why was he calling? "I heard about what happened," he continued. "I have to say, I'm not surprised. People don't always appreciate honesty when it exposes their weaknesses." There was no malice in his tone, just observation. She swallowed, waiting. That being said, I don't believe in letting talent go to waste. Sophia barely had time to process his words before he made his offer. A position at his firm, not as a receptionist, not as an assistant, a role that mattered. One where her voice wouldn't just be tolerated, it would be valued. "People like you," Hayes said, "don't come around often. You understand business beyond numbers. You see the heart of it, and that's exactly what we need." She blinked, gripping the phone tighter. Just yesterday, she had been thrown away like she was nothing. And now, she was being offered something beyond anything she had ever imagined. A lifetime of self-doubt whispered that it was too good to be true. But another voice, one she had heard for the first time at that gala, strong and sure, told her this was exactly where she was meant to be. "I accept," she said, barely believing the words had come from her own lips. A chuckle rumbled through the line. "Good. Welcome to the team." Just like that, her supposed failure had turned into the biggest breakthrough of her life. As she ended the call, something inside her shifted. Just days ago, she had thought losing her job was the worst thing that could happen. But now, she saw it clearly. It had been a gift. Sterling Corp had never been her final destination. It had just been the place that showed her what she was truly capable of. And now, she was stepping into a world where her talents wouldn't be hidden. They would be celebrated. What Nathan saw as a mistake had led her to something far greater than she ever expected. Nathan sat at his desk, fingers tapping restlessly against the polished wood. The silence in his office felt heavier than usual. The morning after Sophia's firing, it had been nothing more than office gossip. An employee let go for overstepping. But now things had changed. People weren't just whispering about her dismissal. They were questioning it. Investors, board members, even some of his top executives were subtly pushing back. And the biggest blow had come that morning. Oliver Hayes had made his move. The announcement had spread like wildfire. Sophia Lane had joined Hayes' firm in a senior role. It wasn't just surprising, it was humiliating. The same woman he had dismissed without a second thought had been recognized by one of the most powerful investors in the industry. And worse, Hayes had spoken about her publicly, praising her insight, her courage, her ability to see what others couldn't. Nathan clenched his jaw. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. She was just a receptionist. Or at least, that's what he had thought. Desperation crept in. Maybe he had acted too fast. Maybe, just maybe, he had let his ego dictate his decision instead of logic. What if he had kept her on? What if he had recognized what Hayes had seen? The realization left a bitter taste in his mouth. Swallowing his pride, he made a call to Sophia. He rehearsed what he would say. A new offer. A bigger role. A salary she couldn't refuse. He just needed to convince her that Sterling Corp was where she belonged. But when Sophia answered, her voice was different. Stronger. More certain. He laid out his offer, expecting hesitation, maybe gratitude. Instead, she laughed softly. "I appreciate the offer, Nathan," she said, "but I think we both know I've already found where I belong." The finality in her tone sent a sharp pang through his chest. She wasn't coming back. Not for more money. Not for a higher title. Not for him. As he ended the call, a heavy truth settled over him. One he couldn't ignore. He had underestimated her. And in doing so, he had lost something far more valuable than just an employee. He had lost someone who saw the world differently. Someone who had the power to change things. And now, someone else had recognized it first. Sophia had won. Not just the job, not just the success, but the self-worth that came with knowing she was exactly where she was meant to be.